The Texas sun cut through the wooden slats of the auction barn, casting long stripes across the dust-covered ground. Inside the pen, a chestnut stallion named Rusty shifted his weight anxiously, his hooves kicking at the dirt. Around him, men leaned on rails, arms crossed, expressions smug. They'd already decided what he was worth. Nothing. "He's wild," someone said. "Won't take a rider. Ain't worth the grain he eats." Then came the voice of Clint Hargrove, sharp and final. "That horse don't got a lick of value. Send him off." Laughter followed like a stampede. In the back of the crowd stood Dean Whitmore, silent, observant. His old boots were caked in dirt, his hands scarred from decades on the land. But it wasn't Dean's eyes that locked onto Rusty, it was Emmett Castillo's. A quiet man in his late 60s, Emmett had kept his distance from horses ever since his daughter died in a riding accident. That was 10 years ago, but the ache hadn't faded. Today, he didn't know why he came. Maybe out of habit, maybe fate. But something about the way Rusty held his head, defiant, proud, pulled at something buried deep inside him. The auctioneer's voice barked over the speakers. "Last chance. $25. Anyone. No hands. No interest. Just more sneers." From the far side, Raylan Pierce, a younger rancher with a sharp tongue, shouted, "Put him down or give him away. He's just meat on 4 legs." But Rusty wasn't done. Without warning, the horse surged forward, not in panic, but with purpose. He spun hard, hooves slicing the ground, dust flying like a desert storm. The crowd went silent as the stallion performed a series of agile, deliberate movements. It wasn't rage. It was skill. Rusty was showing them what they'd missed. Dottie Carmichael, who'd seen more auctions than she could count, leaned toward Nora Bellamy, whispering, "He's not broken. He's misunderstood." Nora nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving the horse. On the edge of the ring, even Joanna Whitaker, known for her sharp opinions, was quiet, her brow furrowed. They weren't watching just a horse. They were watching a spirit refusing to be dismissed. Emmett stepped forward. His boots crunched the dry dirt, his voice low but clear. $50. Heads turned. Gasps. Isabel Wrangle, standing near the auction board, raised an eyebrow. "You serious?" But Emmett didn't flinch. For him, Rusty wasn't just a horse. He was a mirror. Of loss. Of fight. Of something still alive inside a man who thought he was done. And somehow, Rusty seemed to understand. The trailer door creaked open, and Rusty stomped onto the gravel driveway of Emmett Castillo's modest ranch outside of Llano, Texas. The place was quiet. Too quiet. The barn hadn't housed a horse in years. The fields were overgrown. Tools sat rusted where they'd been left. It was as if time had stopped the day Emmett's daughter, Sophie, was buried. But now, something was shifting. Rusty raised his head, ears flicking, sensing the change too. Emmett watched him carefully from a distance, arms crossed. He didn't know what he was doing. Only that something about this horse wouldn't let him walk away. Inside the house, Clara Benavides, Emmett's longtime neighbor and the closest thing he had to family, watched from the kitchen window. She dried her hands on a towel and shook her head. "You're bringing ghosts back with that one," she muttered under her breath. Emmett hadn't spoken much about Sophie in years, but Clara knew what this was. Not a project. A wound reopening. And maybe healing, too. She considered calling Dottie Carmichael, who always seemed to know what to say when the past crept up, but something told her to wait. Emmett needed space. Rusty refused the stall. Emmett tried 3 times to lead him inside, but the horse planted his feet like roots in the earth. He wouldn't budge. Emmett didn't yell. He didn't tug. He just stood there, staring into the animal's eyes. And there it was again, that fire. Rusty didn't fear him. He challenged him. The same way Sophie used to, back when she was 10 years old and insisted on saddling her own pony without help. Emmett felt the lump in his throat rise before he could push it down. Later that evening, Joanna Whitaker stopped by with feed and supplies. She was blunt, as always. "He's not gonna trust you in a day, Emmett. That horse has been lied to by too many hands." Emmett nodded without looking up. He hadn't said much since bringing Rusty home. But Joanna's words sat with him like a stone in his boot. Maybe trust wasn't what he needed from Rusty. Maybe he needed to earn something deeper, respect. That night, Emmett sat on the porch, watching the moonlight catch on Rusty's coat. The horse stood at the edge of the fence, watching back. Neither of them moved. Two figures, scarred by pasts they didn't speak of, quietly measuring each other across the dark. Emmett took a slow breath, remembering Sophie's voice. Sometimes the wild ones aren't meant to be tamed, just understood. And for the first time in a decade, Emmett whispered aloud to no one in particular. "Maybe I brought him home for me." The following morning, the air was heavy with heat, even before sunrise. Emmett Castillo stepped out onto the porch with a cup of black coffee, his eyes instinctively scanning the pasture. Rusty was there, standing still near the far fence, his silhouette barely moving. It had been 2 days since the auction, and though they shared the same land, the distance between them remained. Emmett hadn't tried to ride him. Not yet. The horse had earned his space, and Emmett wasn't ready either. Deep down, something about Rusty still unsettled him, like standing too close to a memory you haven't made peace with. Later that day, Clara Benavides brought over a pie and a warning. "Raylan Pierce's been asking about that horse," she said as she placed the dish on the kitchen counter. Emmett raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Clara crossed her arms. "Said it was a mistake letting you take him. Claims the auctioneer didn't clear it right. Word is, Clint Hargrove wants him put down. Says he's dangerous." Emmett's jaw tightened. "He's not dangerous," he said, his voice low and firm. Clara looked at him carefully. "I didn't say he was." Emmett spent the afternoon fixing the broken fence near the east pasture. Rusty stayed close, watching his every move. Not approaching, but not leaving either. There was a tension between them, but it wasn't fear. It was something older. Something like recognition. When Emmett knelt to hammer in a new post, Rusty stepped forward. Just one slow step. The hammer slipped from Emmett's hand. They both froze. For a moment, it felt like the past and present had folded into each other. That night, Emmett sat at the old barn's workbench, sorting through boxes he hadn't touched in years. Dust-covered brushes. Frayed ropes. A cracked leather saddle. Sophie's saddle. He ran his fingers over her name, burned into the leather by hand. "She never liked riding calm horses," he muttered to himself. "Said they didn't have enough fight." The barn echoed with silence, broken only by the occasional stomp of Rusty's hooves outside. Emmett didn't cry. He hadn't in years. But something inside was starting to loosen. Just before midnight, headlights appeared down the gravel road. A beat-up pickup truck rumbled to a stop outside the gate. Emmett stepped out cautiously, shotgun in hand, just in case. Raylan Pierce stepped out, boots crunching gravel, hands raised. "Easy, Emmett," he said. "Just came to talk." Emmett didn't lower the shotgun. "Then talk fast." Raylan looked past him toward the barn. "That horse, you don't know what he's been through." And Emmett, eyes narrowing, replied, "Maybe that's exactly why he's here." Raylan Pierce stood by the fence, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the barn where Rusty slept in the shadows. The moonlight cast long lines across his face, revealing more than just exhaustion. It revealed guilt. Emmett Castillo watched him carefully, still holding the shotgun loosely at his side. "Start talking," Emmett said. Raylan sighed and glanced toward the pasture. That horse, he wasn't supposed to survive. Clint had him lined up for culling weeks ago, but the paperwork got mixed up. Auctioned him by mistake. Emmett's eyes narrowed. Why would Clint care now? Raylan hesitated. Because Rusty isn't just any horse. Inside the house, Clara Benavides paced the kitchen. She'd seen Raylan's truck, and her gut told her trouble was coming. She peeked through the curtain, eyes narrowing when she saw the way Emmett stood, tense, guarded. Clara didn't trust Raylan, not since he'd lied about that fire near the West Ridge 2 summers back. She picked up her phone and dialed Dottie Carmichael, who still had connections with the sheriff's office. "Keep an ear out," she whispered. "Something's brewing." Back at the fence, Raylan finally broke. Rusty was part of a breeding program Clint was funding. He was supposed to be the flagship stud, but something went wrong. Real wrong. Emmett frowned. "What do you mean?" Raylan looked ashamed. They pushed him too far. Early, hard training, aggressive methods. He fought back. Hurt one of the trainers bad. After that, they labeled him a liability. Wanted to get rid of him quietly. Emmett shook his head slowly. "So you threw him away, and now you want him gone again because he survived?" Raylan took a step closer. "Look, I'm not proud of it. But Clint's got eyes everywhere. If he finds out Rusty's making progress, if that horse competes, performs, he'll come for him. He won't risk the story getting out." Emmett tightened his grip on the shotgun. "Let him come. I don't scare easy." Raylan paused, then said something Emmett didn't expect. "I came here to warn you, not threaten you. Keep Rusty quiet. Off the radar." Then he turned and walked away, gravel crunching beneath his boots, the sound fading into the silence of the night. Later, alone in the barn, Emmett sat on a hay bale, staring at Rusty, who now stood inside his stall without resistance. The horse was calm, but alert, like he knew someone was watching. Emmett leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "They tried to break you," he whispered. "But you're still standing." And in the silence that followed, Rusty blinked slowly, his only reply the steady sound of his breath. 3 days passed with barely a word spoken between man and horse, yet something had shifted. Rusty no longer kept his distance. He followed Emmett along the fence line, ears pricked, steps measured. He still wouldn't allow a saddle, not yet, but the wildness in his eyes had softened, not vanished. Emmett knew better than to force anything. Earning trust took time. And with Rusty, it wasn't just about trust, it was about rebuilding something that had been violently torn apart. Joanna Whitaker stopped by that morning with a few bales of hay and her usual sharp tongue. "You planning to ride him or just start a poetry club?" she said, tossing a glance at Rusty, who stood near the barn doors like a sentinel. Emmett smirked, but it didn't last. "He's not ready. And maybe, neither am I." Joanna leaned against the fence and studied Emmett. "That horse doesn't look broken anymore. He looks like he's waiting." Emmett nodded. "So am I." That afternoon, Emmett led Rusty into the open pasture with nothing but a lead rope. No bridle, no saddle, just space and patience. At first, the horse circled him warily, testing boundaries. But then, as if sensing something deeper, Rusty trotted in, brushed against Emmett's shoulder, and stood still. Emmett froze. He placed a hand on Rusty's neck, firm but gentle. The horse didn't flinch. The connection was small, but it was real. Something unspoken passed between them, something neither had felt in years. Peace. Later that evening, Clara Benavides returned with news. Sheriff Morrison stopped by Dottie's. "Clint Hargrove's been poking around, asking if you plan on showing that horse in public." Emmett raised an eyebrow. Why would he care? Clara's expression darkened. "Because the minute that horse gets seen, people start asking questions. About where he came from. About what Clint did to him. Emmett's voice dropped low. Let him come. I'm not hiding him. As night fell, Emmett found himself back in the barn, brushing Rusty's coat in silence. The old saddle, Sophie's, hung on the wall, untouched. He looked at it for a long time, his hand frozen mid-stroke. The memories flooded in, her laughter, the way she leaned forward on a gallop, fearless. Emmett closed his eyes, the brush falling from his hand. He could almost hear her voice whisper, "Ride again, Daddy. Not for me, for you." He turned, slowly walked to the saddle, and lifted it off the wall for the first time in 10 years. The morning was still, the kind of quiet that makes even the birds wait before singing. Emmett stood in the barn, the saddle in his arms, staring at Rusty as if asking permission. The horse looked back, calm but alert. There was no fear in him, just that same steady fire that had drawn Emmett in from the start. Slowly, carefully, he approached. Rusty didn't move. Not when Emmett rested the saddle blanket on his back. Not when the leather touched his coat. He just stood there, breathing deep, like he was ready to. Emmett tightened the cinch with hands that hadn't done this in a decade. Every motion came back like muscle memory, precise, quiet, respectful. Clara Benavides watched from the barn doors, arms folded, heart pounding in her chest. "You sure about this?" she asked softly. Emmett didn't answer. His eyes never left Rusty. For a moment, he looked younger, like the man he used to be, before the world took more than it gave. Clara didn't speak again. She just stepped aside. Mounting was slow. Emmett didn't rush, didn't force. He moved like a man approaching sacred ground. Rusty shifted once, adjusting, but didn't resist. Then Emmett was up. In the saddle. Breathing. Balanced. Alive. For the first time in years, the weight of grief didn't sit on his shoulders. It was under him, carrying him forward. He nudged Rusty gently, and the horse took a step. Then another. Smooth. Controlled. No buck, no fight. Just motion. Outside, Joanna Whitaker had pulled her truck off the road, drawn by the sight of Emmett riding again. She didn't say anything, just stood with her hand over her mouth as Rusty trotted past, light and strong. "Well, I'll be damned," she whispered. "That old man still knows how to move." And Rusty? He wasn't just carrying weight. He was answering something, responding to a call he hadn't heard in years. As the ride continued, something deeper unlocked. Emmett rode with ease, guiding Rusty around the pasture, feeling the rhythm return to his bones. He didn't think about Sophie. He didn't need to. She was already there, in the wind, in the saddle, in the way Rusty seemed to breathe in sync with him. For the first time, Emmett wasn't haunted. He was healing. But when he brought Rusty back to the barn, there was a truck parked by the fence. A black Dodge. Dust still rising behind it. Emmett's eyes narrowed. It wasn't Clara. It wasn't Joanna. It was Clint Hargrove, and he wasn't alone. The barn fell silent as Clint Hargrove stepped out of the truck, boots crunching over the gravel like warning shots. He wore his usual scowl, but there was something colder behind his eyes this time. Beside him stood Raylan Pierce, arms folded, avoiding Emmett's gaze. Emmett didn't move from where he stood, reins still in hand, Rusty calm beneath him but clearly alert. The wind shifted, carrying the weight of something old and unresolved. Clint didn't waste time. "You've made your point, Emmett. You can ride again. Good for you. But that horse doesn't belong to you. Not legally. He's tagged under my program, and you bought him on a technicality." Emmett's jaw clenched. "You let him go to auction. I paid for him fair and square." Clint stepped closer. "He's not just a horse. He's evidence. Proof of what I've built, and of what could destroy me." His voice dropped. He's dangerous, and I won't let you parade him around like some redemption story." Inside the barn, Clara Benavides stood frozen, listening. She held her phone tightly in her hand, already dialing Dottie Carmichael, just in case this turned into something more than talk. Outside, Rusty shifted under Emmett, sensing the tension thickening. Raylan finally spoke, his voice low. "Clint, maybe we just walk away. Let him have the horse." But Clint turned sharply. "You don't get to tell me what to do. Not after what it cost me to cover up that mess." That's when Emmett dismounted. Calmly, deliberately. He walked right up to Clint, eyes locked. "You're not here because of some legal tag," he said. "You're here because you're scared. Scared people will find out what you did. How you broke that horse. How many others you buried before him." Clint laughed bitterly. "You don't have proof." Emmett looked over his shoulder at Rusty. "Don't need it. He is the proof." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Clint's voice dropped, like poison leaking from a cracked pipe. "You make this public, I'll bury you in court. I'll take your land, your name, everything." Emmett didn't flinch. "Try it." And then he turned his back. Walked to Rusty. Placed a hand on his neck, steady and firm. "This horse survived everything you did to him. And so did I." Clint stood still, jaw tight, fists clenched, until finally, he spat on the dirt, turned around, and got back in his truck. Raylan hesitated, gave Emmett a single nod, then followed. But as the dust from the tires settled, Clara stepped out of the barn, her voice shaking. "You know he's not finished, right?" The next morning, the sky hung low and gray over the Castillo ranch. A storm was coming, not just in the clouds, but in everything Clint Hargrove had left behind in his wake. Emmett stood on the porch, arms resting on the rail, staring out at Rusty grazing peacefully in the pasture. The threat was real now. Clint had power, lawyers, and a long history of getting his way. But Emmett had something Clint didn't: truth. And a horse that refused to be silenced. Inside, Clara Benavides paced the kitchen like a caged bird. "You need to be smart, Emmett," she said. "You think Clint plays fair? He'll drag this into court, bankrupt you in a week. That horse is a threat to his whole operation." Emmett poured himself a cup of coffee, his hand steady. "Then let him come. I've lost everything once before. I'm not afraid to lose it again. But I won't give him back." Clara's voice softened. "You're not doing this for Rusty alone, are you?" Emmett looked at her for a long moment. "No. I'm doing this for Sophie." That afternoon, Joanna Whitaker arrived with a camera slung over her shoulder. "You sure about this?" she asked. Emmett nodded. "It's time people see the truth." They took Rusty out to the field. Joanna filmed as he moved, his strength, his grace, his obedience. Not a beast. Not broken. Just a survivor. "This video goes online tonight," Joanna said. "Once it's out there, Clint can't erase it." Emmett looked down at Rusty. Let them see what they tried to destroy. By nightfall, the video had spread fast. Dottie Carmichael called with news. Sheriff Morrison saw it. So did 3 local papers. Clint's already calling in favors to try and shut it down, but it's too late. The internet has a long memory. Emmett didn't celebrate. He knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a different kind of fight. One fought in headlines and courtrooms, not pastures. But for the first time, the silence around what happened to Rusty had been broken. That night, thunder rolled across the hills. Emmett sat in the barn beside Rusty, rain tapping gently on the metal roof. He spoke softly, as if to the storm. "You weren't just thrown away," he said. "They tried to erase you. But you came back stronger." Rusty nuzzled his shoulder, a rare sign of trust that made Emmett's chest tighten. Outside, in the dark, a pair of headlights cut through the rain, and didn't stop at the gate. The headlights stopped just a few feet from the gate, engine rumbling in the dark. Emmett stepped out of the barn into the rain, shotgun resting against his shoulder. Clara Benavides came running from the house, umbrella in hand, but he raised a hand to stop her. "Stay back." The door of the black Dodge creaked open, and Clint Hargrove stepped out, soaked but unfazed. No Raylan this time. Just Clint, and the storm behind his eyes. "You think a video and some pity clicks are gonna take me down?" Clint said, voice raised over the rain. "You humiliated me. That horse is a liability, and I've got the paperwork to prove he's mine." Emmett didn't flinch. "Then show it to a judge." Clint took another step forward. "I didn't come to talk." That's when Emmett saw it, clutched in Clint's hand, a folded envelope, damp but official-looking. Legal papers. A court order. Inside the barn, Rusty stirred, sensing the weight in the air. His hooves clicked nervously against the floorboards. Emmett held the gate closed. "You abused that horse. Lied about his condition. Buried every mistake you made." Clint's voice dropped. "You're playing hero now, but you weren't always so noble. You trained under me, remember? You stood by while we broke dozens just like him." Emmett's jaw tightened. "And I've paid for it every damn day since." Clara stepped beside him, umbrella forgotten. "You want to fight in court, Clint, then fight. But you don't get to intimidate us here." Clint chuckled, shaking his head. "You people think the law is on your side because of a video? I own the law in this county." At that moment, headlights appeared behind Clint's truck. Another vehicle pulled in. Then another. One by one, townspeople arrived. Joanna Whitaker, Dottie Carmichael, even Sheriff Dean Morrison, stepping out with his badge visible on his chest. The sheriff spoke first. "You need to turn around, Clint. You've been warned." Clint froze. The authority in the sheriff's voice was clear and final. Emmett looked around at the people who had come. People who had once turned a blind eye now stood beside him. Rusty stood in the barn doorway, rain glistening on his coat, as if he too knew something had changed. Clint said nothing more. Just got in his truck and drove off, tires spinning in the mud, rage left hanging in the rain. Emmett stood still for a long moment, the rain soaking through his shirt, his hand resting gently on the gate. He looked back at Rusty, eyes full of something close to peace, and whispered, "It's over now, almost." A week passed. The storm gave way to clear skies and warm light that stretched across the hills like a quiet promise. The Castillo ranch, once overgrown and forgotten, now hummed with life. Fences were repaired. The barn roof was patched. And in the center of it all stood Rusty, alert, strong, and calm in a way no one had ever seen before. He wasn't just a survivor anymore. He was becoming something else entirely, a symbol of second chances. Emmett walked out to the pasture at sunrise, coffee in hand, boots still damp with morning dew. Rusty met him at the gate, no lead rope, no hesitation. Just trust. Emmett reached up, scratched between the horse's ears, and smiled softly. "You ready?" he whispered. "Not for a show, not for court, not for anyone else. Just for themselves." It was time to ride, not to prove anything, but to live again. Down the road, the small town of Llano had been buzzing with talk. The video Joanna had posted had now reached thousands. Animal rights groups had taken interest. A full investigation into Clint Hargrove's breeding operation was underway. No one had seen him since the sheriff's visit that rainy night. Rumors said he'd left the county. Others said he'd hired lawyers. But Emmett didn't care anymore. That part of the story was finished. Clara Benavides stood beside Dottie Carmichael at the edge of the pasture that morning, watching as Emmett mounted Rusty again. "He looks lighter," Dottie said. Clara nodded. "That's 'cause he let go." Rusty moved across the field like wind, fluid, powerful, without fear. Not because he was forced, but because he finally felt safe. Every step was freedom. Every breath, redemption. The horse they called Worthless was showing the world what true value looked like. As the ride ended, Emmett dismounted and looked to the sky, eyes stinging. He thought of Sophie, not with pain this time, but with warmth. He could almost hear her laugh in the wind. "I did it, baby girl," he whispered. "I didn't quit." Rusty nudged his shoulder, as if to say, "Neither did I." That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the pasture gold, Emmett sat on the porch, Rusty grazing nearby. For the first time in years, the quiet felt like peace, not emptiness. The past had shaped him, yes, but it didn't own him anymore. And the horse once left behind had led them both home.